So thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know it's been a busy week. My name is Liz Kissenweather. I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's panel. And title of the panel is The Entrepreneur's Journey, Learning from Successes and Setbacks. And a little bit of background, I was involved in Penn State entrepreneurship for over 17 years. I started in the College of Engineering, in the School of Engineering Design, and retired about a little over a year ago, and was involved in kind of helping Penn State launch entrepreneurship education here. So it's been a great journey, and Startup Week is one of the crown jewels of entrepreneurship here. So it's great to be part of this panel, and I hope you enjoy the session. So the plan is I'm going to do a really quick introduction of all four of the panelists, and then kind of see if we have questions right away from the audience. Right? If there are no questions, I have some questions to get things kind of rolling, but we want to maximize time for audience to ask questions of our panelists. So we'll get started. First of all, Naeem Hussain is here. He's the founder and CEO of Keen Home, and it's based in New York City. He's a Penn State grad from 2005. And Keen Home's first product is the Keen zoning system, which provides individual room temperature controls, including smart vents and smartphone apps, so that you can control the temperature in every room in your home 24/7. And before he started Keen Home, Naeem was doing real estate investment in New York City, as well as working in finance. Okay. Next up is Nina Jenkins. She's listed on the program as a senior research associate in entomology in College of Ag Sci, but she is much more than that. She is the founder of a company called Condio Tech, which is developing an EPA-registered bed bug biopesticide called Apprehend. If any of you have ever experienced bed bugs, you will know that this is a product that we want to see on the market as soon as we can.
That's amazing.
So it's a great story. So next is Maureen Mulvihill, and she's the president and CEO of Actuated Medical here in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. Over the past 11 years, Maureen has really helped transition Actuated Medical from kind of a prototype company to a fully integrated medical device company that develops, manufactures, and sells its own devices. And some of those products include systems for support of surgeries, blood and bone sampling, and transdermal drug delivery. And last is Matt Rose. He's a Penn State graduate in 1994. He's the managing director of 1855 Capital here at Penn State, and he's also the co-founder of that group. And 1855 Capital is a seed and early stage venture capital fund investing in companies that have close ties to Penn State. And Matt also has extensive experience in the semiconductor industry, both in startups and venture capital, both here in the United States and internationally. So we have a panel that's about as broad as we think we could ever provide during Startup Week, which is great for you. So it's good news. So do we have any questions from the audience to get started? No, it's early. Don't be afraid.
It's got to be one.
One,
Come on.
just one.
There you go.
I have one, but I'm being a little bit facetious. What's the best question you were ever asked? And what was your response to that question? In terms of panels, I've seen many of you in panels. I'm sure you've been.
Yeah,
The
great
depth of
question.
experience you have here is tremendous.
Yeah. So anybody want to jump in? You stumped the
Now
panel.
we're silent.
That's a hard one. I'll get back to you. I'll think of something.
I go the opposite way. So Priya just asked me to talk about something like not bad that happened, but something that happened and you had to compensate for it type thing. So it wasn't on a panel, but it was kind of an interesting conversation because instead of the happiness, joy of being an entrepreneur and the roller coaster, you're always on the top of the hill instead of that bottom one. You know, so she's asking about what's that bottom one look like, right? I would say that in 2014, I had been courting, or they had been courting me, a distributor to sell my first product. And the gentleman that I was interfacing with and negotiating with about a week before I was supposed to sign the contract called me up and said, I'm leaving and I'm going somewhere else. And I'm like, Mike, should I still sign? Oh yeah, Maureen, it'll be okay. Go ahead. And so I signed. And then, months go, sales aren't happening. Months go, sales aren't happening. About 15 months into the contract, the 2-year contract, I ran into the CEO at a conference. So I grabbed him and I took him outside and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And he goes, oh, you have a great product, but I didn't incentivize the sales guys. Well, I don't know if you guys know about anything about salespeople, but you got to incentivize them or they won't do anything. So I said, all right, you got 3 months to turn this around. And he didn't, and I had to cancel the contract. Turns out that they were advertising, they were trying to get acquired, and they were advertising 21 new products, and they kept TubeClear in the new products category, which means there's no incentivizing the sales guys. So, but turning that around, when that company got acquired, then they laid off like 7 senior sales guys that I then hired. All right, so we're on the roller coaster right? Okay. Anyway, so those guys in 2017 got TubeClear. You look at the sales funnel. They got 75 hospitals at the top of that sales funnel, and now we're moving them down. So I don't know what's going to happen down here because our sales cycle is long. But the fact that now TubeClear is being talked about at 75 facilities is pretty awesome.
I was thinking that maybe it would be good for all of us to hear about, maybe a success story and a challenge from each of the panelists. So we could all learn from, they've gone through successes as well as challenges, because you learn not just from successes, but also from failures.
Yep, I agree.
So I think that'll be great if each of them could spend, a couple minutes
that was
talking
actually
about
my question. So,
great.
Maureen took the lead.
I did.
Here was a learning failure, right? So if each of you would like to do that, talk about, especially the failure side. We are famous for talking about all the successes that we see in entrepreneurship, and we don't always hear the very interesting stories of troubles and failures. So if each of you would like to talk about
I'll jump
some
in.
of those, that'd be great.
I think scaling your team, it's always a challenge because, and I just spoke about this about an hour ago, there's a huge volume of work that needs to get done, and you need to hire people quickly to do the work, otherwise you never make it to market, right? And you're constantly looking for, if you're in a tech startup, you're constantly looking for good engineers, good talent. And it's easy early on when you've raised a couple $1,000,000, you need to spend it by hiring people to build your product, to sort of be lured away from the core culture that you're trying to build to chase the MIT resume or the machine learning PhD, right? And we certainly did that. Made the mistake of bringing on a sort of neuroscientist, cybernetics, machine learning expert, amazing on paper, very well spoken, nice guy, but ultimately ended up paying the guy well into the 6 figures to write a lot of math for us that then our engineers couldn't really translate to meaningful production quality code, right? And it takes time to kind of figure that out. It's not like, after a month you're realizing that this guy is great at writing math equations, but that's not really market. You can't take that to market. So it took about 6 months and a good chunk of money down the drain before we figured out that A, he wasn't really a culture fit, and B, we sort of got lured into the buzzwords, and it wasn't really going to be tangible what he was producing for years to come. So that was certainly a tough lesson to really, and I said this again, so I'm apologizing for repeating. Better to have, and this is not necessarily relating to him, but Brad Feld is a mentor of mine, and he told me very early on that it's better to have a hole on your team than an asshole. And it's something that it's tough to come to terms with that and to come to grips with that when you just have so much pressure of you need to do so much on a short time frame. But a couple years in now, it's something that I take to heart every day when I look to hire people.
Okay, well, to describe my challenges or failures, I probably have to talk a little bit about our product, which is a biopesticide for controlling bed bugs. So it's based on a fungal disease of insects. And if insects or if bed bugs crawl over a surface that's been sprayed with this biopesticide, they pick up the spores on their legs, they spread it on their bodies, and then the spores, just like seeds, germinate and they penetrate into the body of the bed bug. They grow inside its blood system and then it dies. And it's a technology that I've been working on for a number of different pests before we came across bed bugs. But for bed bugs, it was really important because the chemicals that are currently used don't work very well. This is why we have this massive bed bug epidemic in the US at the moment. So we kind of had the technology almost there. We just had to adjust it a little bit and develop the strategy for attacking bed bugs. But we had been using in the lab this little artist's airbrush to spray our formulation of spores, in barriers on various surfaces and run them over. And then when it came to the point where we had to actually register the biopesticide, they said, well, what are the users of this biopesticide going to use to spray it? We can't use this tiny little artist's airbrush, so we'll have to find a sprayer that's commercially available that we can recommend is used. And we had to test every single commercial sprayer that's out there that's used by any pest controller, whether it's in agriculture or whether it's in the home, and we didn't find a single thing that could spray our spores, which have to be sprayed at a very low volume. We call it ultra low volume rate. Almost all pesticides have water added and they're sprayed at high volumes. So all of the sprayers that deal with high volumes were already we can't use those. So we had to, as microbiologists, become engineers and develop a spray system that would be sold alongside our product. All of a sudden, we've got to develop a product to sell a product. and that process took us two microbiologists over 2 years. And we came up with all kinds of monsters that looked like they were promising at first, and then they failed because they blocked, because our spores are particulate, and most things that don't have little particles floating in them. So the tiny nozzles that we had to use got blocked, and then, well, we can't sell that. And actually, it was only 2 weeks before our launch, because we decided to launch anyway, just hoping that it would be all right. We found a system that would work, and we get all of the items imported from China, and we put it together. And the success is that, remarkably, we haven't had a single complaint from that application system from our users since we started selling in November. So it's a huge relief, because honestly, anything could have gone wrong, but it actually
Wow.
didn't. So yeah, that was a close call, and it was a low 2 years thinking we'll never be able to sell this because we can never spray it in the field.
I have very few morbid fears in my life, and one of them is bed bugs. So I'm already itching a little bit.
And
I'll give you my card.
and you be satisfied, because as she explained her product, they die a horrible death. From the product.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll just imagine them dying a horrible
It
death.
sounded like a horror.
Yeah. I can. The story that comes to mind for me. So we have a company. It was a company I was co-founder of, and still is the company. And at one point, we had an interest from a company to buy the company, and so we entered the negotiation. It took a little bit of time. They were a foreign company. It was an international deal. We spent weeks and months negotiating it, and then we were being really careful in terms of how do we do this in such a way that we get what we need out of it, they get what they need out of it, and we get the deal done. And by the way, our company's running out of money. So now at some point halfway through the negotiation, you're sort of committed to get this deal done, and you're starting to weaken your position and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, get it all done, sign the term paper, sign it, shake hands, go out drinking, because it's a foreign company where you go out and you drink to celebrate these things. Everything's happy. We go home. The next thing they have to do is send money. No money. Call up, money in the way? Yeah, money's on the way. A week or two later, still no money. Call back, Yeah, we don't want to do the deal anymore. What do you mean you don't want to do the deal anymore? We had a deal. Yeah, we don't have a deal anymore. And now what do you do? And yeah, you can probably sue them. And yeah, maybe you can get something, but it's an international deal. You're going to sue in their backyard. And by the way, lawyer, that's the last act of, a desperate man. You're not going to get anything out of it at the end of the day. So the lesson learned, right, is no matter how much you think you're being diligent, it goes wrong. By the way, that was 4 years ago. We looked at each other, my partner and I, so what do we do now? And we were out of money, all these sorts of things, but, a little bit of web searching, found a grant program. 1 week later, we prepared a 50-page application for a grant. It was a $2.5–3 million grant. We got it, waited for it, made every dollar count. That was 4 years ago, and the company's probably, I think, we're going to sell the company for a better result 3 to 4 years from now. And the lesson learned is, and the lessons you always find when you're in sort of the startup world, is you're going to be at the bottom. There is an abyss that you're going to be staring at, and it's what you need to, it's what you figure out you're going to do while you're staring at that abyss that makes or breaks whether the startup's going to be successful. I don't think I know very few success stories that didn't stare into the abyss at one point or another. And having a deal done, and having the guy you did the deal with saying, yeah, we don't have a deal anymore, that feels like an abyss, I got to tell you.
So how about for each of you, what is like a success that you just kind of relish, that you always remember as something that was surprisingly positive or serendipitous, or you just hold in esteem for each of you?
Want me to start? Shall I?
Go ahead, you start, Maureen.
Please.
Yeah, okay, sure. All right, so here you have a small medical device company in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. And most VCs I talk to tell me I have to move to Boston or I got to move to San Francisco or something like that. But my asset is my people, and they're not moving because they love living here, right? But anyway, so the first patient that tube clear, and Linda knows this story, most people do. Anyway, the first patient tube clear was ever used on was a 27-year-old soldier at Walter Reed. Not only did this small little rural company in central PA help a human being, but we helped the soldier who was wounded for this country. I mean, it was an emotional day, high fives, all that kind of stuff. The second case is something I can't market. The product was used off-label, so we're indicated for adults. So that meant that it was used in a pediatric case. It was successful, and we helped that child. So another very emotional day because the child was in a very difficult situation. The third big one just happened recently. So those were like in 2012, 2013, or something. The most recent one was a person who was 80% burned. And I don't know if you think about it. If you're 80% burned, that means your whole throat is burned, right? And so our device, I don't know if we've talked about it, but so when you're critically ill, they put a feeding tube through your sinus passage, down your esophagus, and into your stomach. And they feed you through that, and they give you medication through that tube. They clog at about a 25% rate. Our device goes in there and clears that clog mechanically so that you can restore food and medication to that patient. Well, if you're 80% burned, that means your esophagus is burned, and that tube clogged on that patient, and they were able to use tube clear and clear that. So that's what drives us, and that's the thing, is when you hear these cases of you helping these people that are in dire situations, and that's your persistence. Because it's all about persistence and resilience. And there's many abyss, you call it the abyss, I like that, by the way. Mm-hmm. So many times you're in the abyss, and those things, when you hear about it working and you really help somebody, keeps you going.
Not quite so meaningful as those stories, but it is the case that I was lucky enough to run a very large semiconductor business that was communication technology. And how many of you people remember dial-up modems? Yeah. So I sold, I worked for Connexent, and that was formerly Rockwell Semiconductor Systems, and our business sold 60% of the dial-up modems by unit into the world. And our business also had about 80% margin share. In other words, I sold the higher priced products out there in the market. So 80% of the margin that was available in the market came to my division, and 150% of the industry's profit came to my division. So think about that. And by the way, I spent more in R&D developing the roadmap than everybody else combined. Everybody else combined. So we were selling at the peak something like 140 million dial-up modems a year. And this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's how people connected to the internet. So I used to be able to stand up in front of my division and say, you team of people have connected more people to the internet than everybody else in the world combined.
Wow.
So, and that made, and that was impactful, right? And that was really meaningful. And then I remember sitting down with anybody remember the Sega Dreamcast?
Mm-hmm.
First online gaming system. The guy the inventor of the Dreamcast came to me and said, I want to put this online. And by the way, the only place I can get a modem is from you. And I need to buy the modem for a certain price, and I want to buy 20 million of them in the next 3 months. And I really don't have any negotiating position. What's the price?
Yeah.
And of course, now you're sitting in a situation where you say you are absolutely on the top of the world, right? Because, and again, you want to say, oh, at that time you give them a great price, this is a great deal. We gave them a pretty good price. The margin was only 65%. By the way, that was a cut, right? We cut the price. He got a decent deal, and we got better, and the whole thing, and it really helped the business. But it is the case that when you find yourself in the right place at the right time, because you've persisted to get there, it's very rewarding. And you better be doing something that's actually meaningful, like saving lives, connecting people to the internet, doing something that's really meaningful, because that's the only thing that's going to get you through the really tough times, because they're going to be there as well.
I fully agree with that. Yeah, on a somewhat of a tangent, some of the daily boosts that we get, we have a Slack channel that we use to communicate with our team, and we have a happy channel where, when customers tweet or write in or post something positive about using the product, we quickly post it to that, and you kind of just immediately get that gratification that, here's a real user out there, and you're doing a small bit to just improve their day. But my story will be certainly on a more micro level. When my co-founder and I met and doing our MBAs, we were still on the fence whether to do Keen Home full time. He was working as a management consulting. He was going to school part time. I was going to school full time, and I had an offer from an investment bank. So I was really figuring out, both of us, how we were going to potentially split our time, or were we going to jump in with both feet. We got a call from John Biggs, who's editor at TechCrunch, that we were invited to pitch our idea on there's an event called TechCrunch Disrupt. And they have a startup battlefield in New York and in San Francisco, so twice a year. So he said, hey, would you like to pitch your idea on the startup battlefield? We looked at each other immediately, sure. And then we realized that all we had was a 2-page, not even a business plan, a 2-page document, because we just conceived of this idea to enter a NYU business plan competition, right? But we said, hey, look, if we can pull this off, it's 5 weeks away. We can validate, you're going to be in front of live streaming to millions of people all over the world. You can validate, does this idea have any legs? So we essentially created a company in about 5-6 weeks, like everything from a website to creating a prototype, a physical prototype, to business cards, to all collateral. And we pitched on working 100-hour weeks. We got there on the battlefield. We were one of 18 companies in the country, and we pitched our idea. We launched a crowdfunding campaign. We raised $50,000 on Indiegogo for a company that was literally a 2-page document just over a month before that. And then we sort of and then I got an email the next day from a guy I went to elementary school with, and he said, "Hey, I saw you live stream. I haven't spoken to you in 15 years. I work at Lowe's now. Would you like to meet with the VP of Smart Home, who's my boss?" And I said, "Hell no," because we basically put this thing together just to pitch it, just to see if we were going to do it. So long story short, I ended up contacting him 6 months later when we had a little bit more traction. And it was still a team of 3 of us. Hadn't raised any meaningful VC money at the time. Had a better, more expensive 3D printed and laser cut prototype in a Pelican case. And we flew down to Mooresville, North Carolina, and met with their entire smart home team. It was a team of like 6 people at the time. And it was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting, and we were in that room for like 3-4 hours. Didn't open up the Pelican case once. Just convinced them that we were the team that was going to bring this type of product to market, and they were a good partner for us. And fast forward another 6 to 8 months after that, and we got $1 million PO from them, and that really helped us validate demand as we sought to raise more and more money. So. I'll always look back on that kind of early time and that sort of whirlwind, couple months early on where we, made it to that startup battlefield as really, just a turning point for whether Keen Home would even come to be.
That's great. All right. Okay, so let's, I know there's hands up in the audience now. I saw a couple around the room. How about over here? Wait for the microphone to get to you.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a freshman computer science major. So, I know from personal experience, and you guys probably do too, that most startups fail. Like, one of yours is bound to. How do you know when to quit?
That's a great question. I come across so many founders who, should have probably quit years ago, and they're just grinding it out because, you're told on one hand to fail fast, and on the other hand, you're told to be a hustler and to never give up, right? So there's this sort of 2 things at odds with each other, and to an entrepreneur or founder's psyche, it can play a lot of havoc. So I think you really, especially at the early stages, in the pre-seed, seed stages, you're raising seed financing really to figure out if you're going to be able to have a viable product. You're not iterating to product market fit necessarily, maybe you are, but generally you're just validating demand with that money. And if you can validate demand, then you can quickly start iterating to product market fit and start raising more capital and growing at the rates that you need to grow at. But the VC game and the startup game is such that in order for investors to get that ROI, right, you need to be growing at a certain rate. And if you don't fit that profile, there's nothing wrong with that. But you're not necessarily a startup profile at that point. You're a different type of business. You have to understand that, and you have to be honest with yourself. Is this business going to meet this type of growth profile? And if it's not, let me find investors that have a return expectation more in line with my business. And when those are mismatched, oftentimes it can lead to disaster. So you have to really be brutally honest early on. Is there a market for this? Am I going to be able to grow fast enough? And don't ignore the data.
Yeah, I would say that, from personal experience, probably haven't learned it well enough. And I think it has a lot to do with personality that a lot of startup and founders, you'll see they never quit, but they'll change directions so dramatically that it's a different deal. And it's really the dichotomy of, what's quitting and what's changing. It's hard to know. There's an interesting statistic that, you're right, most startups fail. Something like a 99% fail rate, right? But here's an interesting statistic for you, that startups created 40 million jobs in the last 20 years, I think. The economy created 40 million jobs. The net job creation in the economy was the number of jobs created in startups. Now, they're not the same jobs. So, but the point is that making that effort, creating those ideas, putting it into the marketplace, testing, failing, all that stuff You know, it's hard to know what's the right answer as to when to quit and when to change and do all those sorts of things. But over the broad picture of it, it's a hugely healthy and necessary part of our innovation economy.
I call it pivoting.
There's a soft pivot, there's a medium pivot, and there's a hard pivot.
But there's never go home.
Okay. How about right here?
Hey guys, how you doing? My name's Tom O'Neill. I'm a senior in IST college. Actually going into finance because I did not like my IST internship last semester. But anyway, Mr. Hussain, this might be a question more applicable to you. What do you value the most when you're kind of fielding offers from venture capitalists? Is, you know, if you're desperate to get your initial round of funding, do you value, you know, the relationship with the investors more, or kind of the valuation they're giving you, and how that works?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's dangerous when you're raising capital, and I'm sure you'll get the investors' take as well, to be solely focused on any one thing. You know, it's easy to fall into the valuation sort of trap, in that, you know, you have to realize, if you're, you know, really aggressive with valuation and you really negotiate hard on that, the next round of capital you raise, it better be on a good multiple on that valuation, and you better be growing astronomically. Otherwise, it's going to look really bad, right? So it can end up shooting you in the foot if you're not growing, right? If you're raising on a 6 pre-money, that next round better be on a 3, 4x of that. You know, otherwise you're going to have to answer questions, right? So there's a fine line between dilution and getting a good price. I personally think, look, if you're a hot deal and you're going to have seed professional investors knocking on your door, they're all going to have their pitch on how they can provide strategic benefit to you. You know, there's the smart money versus dumb money. You know, ultimately the best investor is the one who's going to tell you up front, hey, look, I'm not going to meddle in your operations, but I'm always here. You pick up the phone, you call me if you need anything, and I will do my best to help you. But it's your company. Here's the money. You run it. And those are the types of individuals that you want on board, that are well connected. You can pick up the phone and call them, but they're not, you know, calling you every week for a check-in and trying to meddle in the operations. And you know, if you can be lucky enough to have a stable of those investors, you know, in your first few rounds, then, you know, not only will they be able to help you operationally, but, you know, really more importantly, you look for sort of brand name investors to help you raise more and more rounds of capital. And then, you know, the dirty secret in Silicon Valley is the tier 1 VCs, if you're failing, they'll try to find a buyer for you, right? They'll try to find a soft landing for you and get you an exit, because it helps everybody, it helps the whole ecosystem.
Did you have?
Yeah, I mean, just again, it's interesting because I guess I'm the investor perspective, but, you know, actually most of my life was really on the other side of the table as sort of operating guy and raising money on the VC. But the thing I would say is that you have to remember your VC relationship. There's 2 relationships that you can't break up. One's your marriage, and the other is your VC. You can't walk away from them. So you better make sure that you are about to enter a relationship that you're going to live with. And by the way, you can actually get divorced in a marriage.
Right.
You can't walk away from somebody who's giving you money. You just that person, you're making a very long commitment to a relationship there. So it ought to work, and then you can figure out on what dimensions in terms of, you know, is it passive money, is it active money? If it's active money, how's the value going to be added? All those sorts of things. But and I think the other point that was made there is a really, really important one. Be real careful of getting yourself over your skis on valuation, because you're going to live with that, and you created an opportunity for a down round before you need one. That's a real problem.
And I think that's an excellent point, especially if you're looking for your lead investor. Generally, they're going to get a board seat, right? And that's a marriage, that board of directors dynamic, especially if it's an early round when it was just you as a board of one or you and your co-founder as board of two. You're introducing a third party into your board of directors. And the VC relationship is very interesting because you're negotiating hard. It can be bitter. Maybe it can be, get a little aggressive. And then the next day you're partners, right? So it's a really funny flip. And the good VCs will know that. And they'll know that they have to properly incentivize the founder at the outset because of that dynamic. So you always want to make sure this is someone who you're comfortable being on a board with, and having regular meetings, really talking about the future strategy of the company and building the company, with that person's opinion in mind.
I would add to this that it's possible that you don't need VC or angel investment at all. And with the support of Penn State, actually, we did the lean startup model. We have no dilution from those kinds of investors. We've got loans, which we pay back on good terms. Ben Franklin have been really great with loan money, and we actually have one single private investor who was one of the people that I contacted when we were building our business model, and this is through the Techcelerator program up at Innovation Park, and we were told that you really have to do customer discovery. So, we were sent out during this course where we just had this bright idea and told to phone up the people that we thought would be our customers and see if they were interested in our product. And I did this. So I was on the phone to various people, and I spoke to this guy who was a independent pest controller down in the DC, Baltimore area, and he got really enthused. He said, look, I want to support you on this. Let me know if I can give you any money. Just let me know. And I said, yeah, sure, Stuart, okay. And he kept phoning me up, and he kept, he was really interested, and he wanted to collaborate. And, he said, so, what size bottle are you going to sell this stuff in? And I said, oh, I'm thinking we might need to get 25-gallon drums. He said, no, we use tiny bottles. We need to be able to carry them into our jobs, into houses. So we spoke on a regular basis as we did our product development, and in the end, Stuart kept saying, I've got 150,000, just ask for it when you need it. And it went on and on and on until eventually we got to the point where we really were going to start, and I said, okay, Stuart, you're on. And we did that deal, but he proved himself to be so valuable, and he is the only dilution investment that we have. Everything else is loans. So depending on how much technology and development you really need, you might be able to do it without actually going to these guys. Sorry.
I think that's right on the head. If you can avoid taking VC money, avoid it.
So I'll go from that. So Actuated has done a lot of our early innovation using small business innovation research grants from National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, DOD, and USDA. So that's another avenue where these SBIRs or STTRs are non-dilutive. So with those funds, I'm not giving away equity in the company. And with the numbers that we brought in, or the different grants that we brought in, we have 10 products in development, and we have right now 17 issued US patents, 3 more coming, and then we have some other ones. So the company really has built the intellectual property portfolios where we own the intellectual property. And we have some early angels, which are more strategic, more friends, but there's not that much money with those guys. However, now I am looking for the VC type funding. But our early stuff with the SBIR, so we get going, and you understand where you're going before you have to worry about the valuation and things like that.
You take less dilution now.
Right.
Other questions? Yes. Go ahead. Right here.
Sorry.
Let us speak.
You go ahead first, and then we'll shift it over here.
You guys were previously talking about trust and relationships and developing relationships with VCs and the dynamic that was involved in that. And we're talking about successes and setbacks here. So was there ever a time where you instilled trust in someone or brought someone into your circle of trust and you turned out to be wrong about them? And if so, was it incremental where you one day were like, oh, okay, this isn't working out? Or was it a one big boom where you're like, this is a failure, this is not the right fit?
Great personnel question.
I can start, you can start, you start.
Well, yeah, I mean, you always have those experiences where, wait a minute, this isn't, the expectations that we have here are not being met one side or the other. And, you know, at the end of the day, you have to decide how to handle it sooner rather than later. And usually it means, okay, you know, we got to go two different ways and the like. It is very, you know, he mentioned it before, if you get bad dynamics on your team, letting that hang around for too long is the most damaging thing you can do. And you got to do yourself and your team a favor to say, hey, you know, we got to move on, and trying to face that sooner rather than later, even though it's very difficult. And because, you know, at the end of the day, you try and avoid saying it's your fault or it's my fault. It's just not working out, and move on, because you ruin the team dynamics. It has a lot of long-term implications.
And 2 points to that. When you let that person go, the team will thank you because they saw it and they saw that person bringing everybody down. The other thing I would say is we had with the founder, right? And he kept saying, oh, the docs will get signed, the docs will get signed, the docs will get signed. So anytime I'm in a group where I'm trying to mentor young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, I always say that whatever your docs are, your agreements, they need to be signed almost like on the first day established in the company. Because as the company starts, people start seeing dollar signs. And if they don't have the best interest of the company at heart, you're going to have trouble. So get the documents signed early so that everybody's in agreement. Even if you're the best of friends, it doesn't always stay that way. So, but yeah, I always say that I take a long time to hire and I fire fast, or I let go fast. And the team always thanks me because they saw it too. And they didn't tell me.
I'll make 2 quick points. You know, the hire slow, fire fast is a popular saying. I think, in my opinion, I agree with it, but I think it's a little bit more nuanced in that as a CEO, as a manager, you need to give your people feedback. You know, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever you can handle administratively. I think too often startups have this sort of fire fast mentality. And you lose your humanity a little bit because, you know, the person may not know everything bad that they're doing. They might not intentionally be screwing up. And I think the something that you can bring, an acumen that you can bring from large companies is they're very good generally about 360-degree feedback, right? My wife works for a big corporation and she has to take hours, you know, every few months doing this 360-degree feedback, but you know, that's both feedback up and feedback down. And I think if more startups could incorporate that, it would certainly be beneficial to those people who aren't working out. And my second quick point is, you know, a lot of startups skimp on lawyers, you know, early on because it can be expensive. But if you can find a good law firm that you essentially pitch them like an investor and get them bought into your vision, a lot of them will defer fees. You know, we deferred maybe $50,000 of fees for over a year. Just because the firm was willing to take a chance on us. And if you can bring a good law firm on board, they can help you, you know, avoid a lot of those trust issues by getting docs in place, getting a legal framework in place to make sure that, you know, you don't get into some seriously hot water with, you know, just administrative issues.
Nina, did you have a comment?
Well, we're really young, so far we've made no hiring mistakes. But I have to say that I was told I needed a CEO. I was the CEO of our company initially, but that's clearly not my strength. I'm more in the technical area. So yeah, we were going to need a CEO, and it did fill me with some horror because I really didn't know who we were going to get. And, you know, this person was going to have, you know, no idea about our product. I was going to have to teach them everything right from the word back because it's really unique, and the likelihood of getting somebody who knew anything about bed bugs and biopesticides was like so slim. But we were incredibly fortunate because our trainer at the Techcelerator, Don McCandless, decided he wanted to change in direction and actually offered himself to take this position. So, and we'd worked with him for, you know, 2 or 3 years. He'd trained us. He'd always given us great advice, you know, and yeah. So when he said that, it was one of those high moments. It was one of the best days of my life because I thought, oh my goodness, I've got a CEO and I know I can work with him. So far, so good.
Yeah.
But there's only 3 of us so far, so well, 3.5.
All right. Yeah, we had a question over here. Yeah.
Hi, I was just interested in some of the logistics of having talent. I'm sorry, the logistics of talent acquisition internationally, which I think only Matt. I'm not sure if Matt Rhodes would be. I'm sorry, Mr. Rhodes might be the only one who can speak to this on this. But also, just your early hires, what you were looking for in terms of matching it with your available funds that you had.
Yeah, I mean, so I can take that. I did have had some experience in international hiring. It was big company types of things that we had staff there. We had those, bunch of people working on it. I think probably more meaningfully to answer your question is, if you're going to bring people into your organization, make sure you bring them into an organization that you know how they work as people, because you're hiring people, whether it's hiring internationally or locally. And I had a lot of experience working across. At one point, I had 20 design centers around the world reporting to me. And it was the case that when I told people they were going to work with a design center, I said the first thing you have to go do is go there and be there for at least 7 to 10 days. And work with them and be with them and the like. And then after that, you can manage them on the phone. You can manage them more effectively. But if you don't know, if you're just talking to a voice, it just doesn't work. So it really is, the international experience, for lots of reasons, things diverse these days. You got to go to where the talent is available. You got to do all those sorts of things. But never forget that they're people. And they're going to have their own environment, their own sort of pressures and ins and outs. And as long as you can identify those ins and outs when you're actually working with them, you can become much more effective. I'm not sure if that answered your question. I'm not sure what you're really looking for, but the international piece of it, I think, is much less meaningful than just remember the people.
Yeah, I mean, we have a full stack app developer in Ukraine. He's a full-time team member, but there's a third party, and there's many of these third parties now that are cropping up that essentially act as the HR. So they pay his payroll, but he's technically a team home. For better or for worse, he's a Keen Home employee. So when we first signed his contract, we flew him to New York from Ukraine. It was his first time in the United States. We flew him. We put him up. We have a test home in New Jersey, so we put him up in the test home. He was here for a month, and really, to that point, really became, forged bonds with our New York-based employees. And then we have a daily stand-up every day. The entire team gets on the phone and everybody talks for 30 seconds on what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, and if they have any challenges. And he's on every stand-up call. So once they're back remote, it's all about communication and making sure that they're into the fold with what's going on a daily basis. And there's so many tools today to allow you to do that more effectively than 5-6 years ago.
Good. I guess I'll hand over here.
So many students right now may not be ready to jump in, and start their own business. But they also may not want to go work for corporate America. So they may want to come work for you. So what are you looking for? What is that maybe intangible? What are those characteristics? Maybe not specifically the discipline, but what do you look for in people for your team that they should be thinking about?
Okay, so we're actually in a wonderful position where we're 6 miles down the road, and people hear, oh, there's a medical device company in Bellefonte, so we get lots of resumes, especially from Penn State, right? So the resumes come in, we're like, oh, that person might be neat, or that not. But when we bring the person in, we go through a very rigorous interview process. At least 5 people have to interview that person, because the corporate culture fit is far more important to us than really what their background is. So in the case we had, we hired a lot of interns from Penn State. We hire a lot from South Hills Business School. And then those that work out well, we bring them on. So we've test driven them, I say, for like 3 months and things like that. We had somebody from Drexel come in, we test drove him for a couple months, then we hired him, those kind of things. But it's that interview process, because what happens is those 5 people that interview that person are now, if they say, yes, we should hire that person, they're now engaged to make sure that person's successful because they said that person would be good in the team. So it's a really good dynamic in the pet, so that where people support each other because, hey, I said you were a good person, I want to make sure you're successful.
You're not gonna love my answer too much. We don't really hire undergrads right out just because we're too small of a company and we need the experience. There have been a few occasions where we've had undergrads extend internships, and miss a semester, miss a 2 semester. We had one intern. He was a Stanford guy, and he basically left school for like a year because he was so effective. He was a mechanical engineer, and we just needed his skill set at that time. But generally, the younger folks on my team are going to be computer programmers, software engineers, and the volume and the quality of work that needs to get done. We just need that at least 4 or 5 years of high quality experience in order just to get the ROI on the salary, because the spread in salary is not that much, because if you think about it, the engineer who's been working at Google for 5 years made good money, and now they're looking to go to a startup because they're looking for a better lifestyle or more meaningful work. So for us, first and foremost, it's tech chops that we look to. So in the rare event that a more younger employee is applying to Keynote, it's how much time are they going to take away from our senior team members for training, for just general hand-holding, and are we going to be able to stomach that as a small company? And generally the answer is no, sometimes it could be yes.
Well, for me, I'll take fresh graduates from Penn State, absolutely. But what I would be looking for is somebody who is pragmatic and flexible. So, I'd be looking for a specific, degree skill set that, like my partner, microbiologist, maybe there's an engineering problem that I want them to tackle because we don't have an engineering department. So somebody who can demonstrate on their CV or at least in their interview that they've performed different roles and can adapt and do this. And, maybe they need to go and stand at our sales booth and become the salesperson, even though they were the microbiologist in charge of quality control or something. I think for us, it's got to be that flexibility, somebody who is enthusiastic and capable of doing many different things and would love to do that, rather than, this isn't my job.
Just one quick question. When you say small company, what are you talking as far as number of employees right now?
15.
15.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Give
Maureen?
or take with interns, but 15 full time.
Okay. And Maureen, how many employees do you have now?
25, 24 here, 1 in Ohio.
All right. So when they say small, that's what they're meaning. So.
That's fair. Yeah.
And we 3.
3.5.
3.5. We're counting halves.
Yeah.
Is that a part-timer? Or?
Yeah, part-time web developer and answerer of customer inquiries. Yes.
Many hats.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, question?
Zane, sorry to pick on you here. Another question.
No worries.
So you said you started in finance. You had an IB offer out of business school. So it goes without being said that you pretty much could have lived the rest of your life, pretty comfortably, working, in finance. So
right.
Can you explain the mindset that you were able to, kind of throw away that career and just jump into a startup?
Light it on fire. I hope I can maybe return to that career one day if need be. But I get your point. No, that's a great question. I think you hear in culture and society today with startups being so hot that this starving entrepreneur type of sob story where I think that's a load of bullshit, right? If you look at the numbers, most startup founders, most startup CEOs, are at least at least undergrad. A lot of them are grad school educated. A lot of them, have worked in, corporate America or Wall Street, what have you, and have made a reasonable amount of money. A lot of them have spouses that work and that have good health care. And I check all of those boxes, man, right? Like, so for me, it was a lot easier to make that leap. Like, sure, there was the year that we couldn't raise any money right at the outset, and my wife's like, "Come on, you're just coming out of an MBA program. I thought we were supposed to get a good job, and you just paid $100K for now you're putting in equity into the company out of your own pocket." So you do have to deal with that, but she had a good job. I was on her health care. I had saved up money. I had an MBA to fall back on, right? I had a Penn State degree, of course, to fall back on. So for me, it was certainly easier to kind of weigh that risk reward. And looking back, even if Keen Home fails, and it could very well fail, it's certainly more likely to fail than it is to have a huge exit, to be honest. And I try to be brutally honest. The network that I gained, the connections, the people that you meet, the brilliant investors, technologists, other executives, you hope that, that can lead you somewhere good. So.
Any more questions? All right. Well, I think we have maybe just 3 minutes or so, and then we can head out to a reception out in the lobby. I think I have one last question for everybody. So when you were in college, get on the Wayback Machine for some of you guys, including me. At the time, did you think you'd be an entrepreneur someday? Was that even on your radar screen? Because I think a lot of people in this audience are undergrads, and it's like, I'm even thinking about it. So.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
You introduced me as a 1994 graduate.
Yes.
Not even close.
Oh.
1979 graduate.
79. Well, round to the next
That's
20s,
right. And so that was a long time ago.
Wow.
I was a physics major playing on the soccer team.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't have a clue. So I was just going to go play soccer and go to grad school, right? And so I would say that the journey is based on life happens. And so I do actually worry about when I talk to some of the undergrads, I'm going to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Okay, maybe, but life happens, and you take your opportunities and the like. And so, I guess, no, I never saw, and it wasn't even in the radar screen at that time. But, as things come at you, if you're curious, flexible, and persistent, something good is going to come out of it.
How about you, Maureen?
So when I was in undergrad and grad school, no, I don't think I ever thought that I would start a company and be here for 11 years and still do what I do and love what I do. But once you're in the mix and you're doing it and you're like it, then you start thinking back in your life and you're like, what did I do? And so, like, I was 10 and I had a paper out. You weren't allowed to have a paper out till you were 11. I had to sign something. My mom had to sign something so I could have a paper out. And initially I did it with my brother, and he hated collecting money, and I just loved collecting money from people, I'm like, and then one time one guy didn't want to pay me. He's like, I'm not paying you. And I'm like, oh, yes, you are paying me. And so then I withheld his paper until he paid me. And then he told my dad somewhere, and he's like, she has quite the attitude. And my dad's like, you owed her money. Of course she's going to have attitude, So anyway, so you think back, you're like, oh yeah, I did have the entrepreneurial spirit back then. But I don't think I knew what the word entrepreneurship was when I started the company. I mean, this word has really come around in the last 8 years, maybe. It really wasn't a word I used when I started the company. So it's just, what you do makes you happy.
I thought it was an American word. I've been here 10 years, and entrepreneurship sort of, emerged in my vocabulary, and I was thinking, oh, really? I've never come across that before.
I couldn't spell it at first. Yeah. I'm like, how do you spell that word?
So Nina, it was never on your radar screen?
No, but I was also of entrepreneurial spirit as a kid. I was always looking at ways to make money, and I did. I was pretty good at it, and I've never been broke because I'm always on the lookout. But my passion was biology, and I went through biology as my degree, and microbiology specifically, and I've loved it. But this part of my career has been just the best because I've combined the two of them. So it's worked out fantastically. But no, I didn't head that way.
And if I could comment on Nina specifically, because I've known Nina now sort of from a distance for 2 years, 3 years, something like that. This is a researcher. This is a scientist. And she fell in love with, I can make a difference. And I can see it. So it's sort of, it happened. It wasn't a goal, it happened. Is that fair, Nina?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And now you're slaughtering bed bugs by the million.
Indeed.
Dying
It's millions.
horrible
So,
deaths.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I mean, I think everyone made excellent points. I would add, apart from persistence, flexibility, put yourself in a position to win, right? So coming out of undergrad, I picked a pretty vanilla route. I was a finance major. I went into finance. Then I got my MBA. But when I was at Penn State, I sort of fell victim to what many students here do, is you get caught up in the whole experience and you don't necessarily take leadership roles and get really super involved in a lot of there's so many opportunities at this school with all the clubs, all the speakers, but when you're young, you don't necessarily see all that, and you're too busy doing other things. So I told myself if I was going to go to grad school, I was going to try to be more involved. So I was class president at Stern, right? I made it a point to really get to know all my peers, of course, and get to know all the faculty, right? So my co-founder came to me. He was in my cohort, and he came to me with this early concept and said, hey, I want us to do this business planning competition together. Maybe if I wasn't class president, he would have come to me. I have no idea. But you put yourself in a position, you put yourself out there, you be a little uncomfortable, right? And sometimes the universe will conspire, right, to sort of align for you. And you have to embrace it when it does.
All right. So watch for opportunity, right? You never know when it might pop up for you. So can you please join me in thanking our panel? They did a great job.